again. It's been a very long time since Earl and I have been here, and I'd forgotten what it feels like to meditate with a group live. We meditate online all the time, and I deeply appreciate that. But I noticed that just being here, I just dropped down so quickly into some quiet place. So it was just really lovely to be here. Well, in preparing for this talk, I was thinking about it a lot, and on Friday, I had the funniest memory. When I was young and just starting to build a business, I used to give talks a lot so that I could market the business and grow it. And I was talking in front of a pretty large group, maybe one of the largest that I had. And I was nervous about it. I was nervous and excited. And so I was getting ready for the talk, and I'm behind the podium, and I stepped out, and I looked down for some reason, and I realized I had two different shoes on. I have no idea how I did that. Don't ask me. But anyway, I looked at the audience, and I told them about it. And I said, "So much for looking good." And everybody just laughed. And of course, I relaxed immediately then. But I think that I had that memory because I've felt both nervous and excited about giving this talk today. I felt nervous because it's the first time I've given a talk in many, many years. And nervous because I've never done it with people in person and online. So that's a new experience for me. But what I really hope, oh, and by the way, no shoes in Zendo, we just have socks, so I'm fine. So I'm a little also nervous because I just want this to be valuable to people. And there might be some people listening or who will be watching at some point who are actually retired and not working. So if that's the case, I hope you listen for the people you love and care about who might need some help in terms of work. It could be a husband, a wife, a neighbor. It could be grandchildren, or it could be a son or a daughter, or maybe a neighbor. Let's see what else I want to say about that, if anything. So people come to talk to me about a variety of concerns related to work. For example, I want to tell you about Jeannie, who was a chief financial officer in a company. She came to see me the day after her boss had made it pretty clear he was going to let her go. She was really a very straight arrow and honest, and she had come upon some irregularities in the finances, and she had confronted him about it. And he, instead of being grateful to her, was very unhappy with her and made it clear that she was going to have to go. By the way, I've changed names to protect the privacy of my clients. Charlie came to me in his early 20s, I think, maybe mid-20s, and he had tried at that point close to 20 different jobs, none of which he liked enough to stay for any length of time. I thought it was an amazing record that he had actually tried 20 different jobs. Sharon came because she felt trapped in her job. She knew what she wanted to do, but she couldn't see how she could possibly get there. And Mark came because he was unhappy at work and depressed. All of them were unclear about what was next. I don't give tests to my clients to find their direction because I believe it's an inside job. No one and nothing else can tell you what your heart desires. The best way to uncover these desires is to strip away the layers hiding them. Layers like fear, misplaced loyalty, low self-esteem, and doubt. That's the work my clients and I do together, stripping away the layers. Instead of tests, we talk a lot. And I do give almost all of my clients homework in the What Color is Your Parachute Job Hunters Workbook written by Richard Bowles. It's not the original book, which is dense and sometimes difficult for people. Actually, I can tell you that I'm one of the few people I know who did the entire book. So most people have it on their shelves, but have never done all the exercises in it. The Job Hunters Workbook is a compilation of exercises and much smaller and very accessible. I think that it's really great. All the exercises are really good, but the most revealing and helpful are the personal stories people write about accomplishments they've had that were deeply fulfilling to them. Many write about jobs they had when they were teenagers. One client told me she ran an entire ice cream shop all by herself. Another started a lawn care business and grew it so much that he paid for college. A third was handed the keys to his boss's car and drove it to pick up and deliver delicate objects sold in her store. Can you hear how the stories reveal strengths like being organized, good with customers, or great at selling? Can you also hear what they must have liked about their work, like being trusted with a lot of responsibility, working independently, or being put in charge? Sadly, some clients have told me that the jobs they had in their youth were their best work experience. So how do you find or create work you love? After coaching people for 40 years, I've come to the conclusion that the bottom line is simple. Not easy, but simple. It's to find a good fit. A good fit with who you are, your personality, your interests, your values, your temperament, and your talents, skills, abilities, and qualities. Otherwise, work will be very stressful, and you'll never feel comfortable or experience flow in your work. That makes me think about a client who told me the first time we met that she was sick and tired of teaching in a college, and particularly with all the bureaucratic rigmarole. So she had quit her job, and now she wondered what to do. Because she had taught English and writing after working together for a while, she decided to start her own business as a writing consultant. I thought it was a very good idea. But the problem was that she was never able to get it off the ground. Later, she returned to teaching where she has been now for many years. She learned a lot about herself from her entrepreneurial experience, mainly that she didn't like selling herself, and most of all, she really missed being part of an organization. Some people are happiest working inside an organization, and some people are happiest working outside, like me. To find a good fit, you have to listen to your heart and then trust your intuition. And the only way I know how to do that is to be quiet. The kind of quiet like when you meditate, or write in a journal, or take a walk alone, or go for a long run or a long bike ride. The kind of quiet where you feel peaceful and can tap into your internal wisdom. I warn you that the opinions of friends and family about what work you should do are not holy pronouncements from the Pope, although we often give them that weight. You'll be happiest if you follow what's right for you, not what's currently popular. And remember that titles are not nearly as important as the work itself. Maybe you can't identify work you're passionate about, or your passion isn't a good choice for a career. What then? Look for a job that at minimum interests you. If you fuel that interest, it might grow into a passion. Well, what if you can't find work you like? Then focus on finding a good company with good people. I always trust the street gossip about a company. It's usually accurate. So trust it and avoid companies that are reputed to treat people badly, no matter how famous they are. They chew people up and spit them out, a former employee told me about a famous company that no longer exists. I've never been interested in coaching people on how to get ahead at work just for the sake of getting ahead. I'm much more interested in helping people identify and find the work that they love to do and design how they want their life to be. I want to help them see the workplace as a great arena for personal growth and development, an arena that's rife with opportunities for spiritual practice. All of you have probably had times when you yearn to not be working. But if you've ever had a period in your life when you were unemployed, you probably got in touch quickly with what a gift work is. It provides structure, purpose, relationships, and the money we need to survive. It may also be the single biggest arena for self-expression available to us. Our working years can span adolescence, adulthood, and old age. I'm 82 now, working part-time and still enjoying it. It's important to be doing something we feel good about, because work takes up so much of our lives, not just the actual hours we work, but also the time we spend commuting to and from work, or traveling for work, complaining about work, or talking or thinking about work. I've concluded that if you like 70 to 80% of your job, that's a great fit, because every job has its downside. The other 20 to 30% is just the stuff we don't like to do but has to be done. As Marcia, a former employee and good friend, reminded me recently, what we all need to decide is what we're willing to put up with. This is a good time to point out that thinking about work, suffering about work, and complaining about work are not action steps. If you're afraid you'll be let go from your job, or you're miserable at work, get into action. You'll feel empowered, be less scared, more energized, and your self-esteem will increase. No matter how much you dislike your work, don't slack off though. While you're there, give it 100% in order to maintain your personal integrity. Do it for you. Well, now here's another warning. Do not call your cousin for advice, the one who has hated her job for 20 years and has done nothing about it. Instead, find people who love their work and talk to them whether you're looking for new work or taking on a challenging new position at your job. And when you meet obstacles, pick yourself up and get going again. Too often, people try something once or twice, and when it doesn't work, they decide it's hopeless. One thing I've learned from meditating regularly for over 2 years now is that consistency makes a big difference. Are you going to quit working on your goals because 2 people told you it was a bad idea? I challenged a client. That's not even a good sample, I told her. I've discovered that the major reason people leave a job is because of their boss. And conversely, they often stay only because of their boss. I've learned that there's no relationship at work more important than with your boss. I just want to remind you that there's no such thing as a perfect boss, because there aren't perfect people. Now I've come to believe that the 70 to 80% rule also applies to bosses. If you like 70 to 80% of your boss's behavior, that person is probably a good fit for you. It's easy to criticize bosses and very hard to be one. I know. I've been a good boss and a bad one. It's definitely one of the hardest jobs that exists. Most people are promoted to managers because they've been stars. But the problem is that the job of a boss is not about being a star. It's about developing other people. And companies usually don't provide any training for that. There seems to be some assumption that it's just in our DNA and we should just know how to do it. Observing others is a powerful tool for learning how to shine as a boss, or deciding what you'll be sure not to do when it's your turn. I don't know how many of you knew Sally Stovall, but I wish I had met Sally Stovall when I was younger and had a staff. Maybe some of you were lucky enough to know her. She started a volunteer organization working on environmental issues here in Oak Park. She was one of the best role models for a leader I've ever seen. She was small and quiet. She had no sharp edges ever. She was thoughtful, a great listener, and very slow to make decisions. But when she did, she was unstoppable. She had a huge impact on our community. When you're looking at where you want to work, it's easy to get seduced by glitter, the company perks, reputation, glamour, or promises. And I should have put in here money. But all that glitters is not gold. Just because a company is well known does not mean that people are treated well or that it's a healthy environment. Additionally, many people discover that the climb up the ladder is not worth what it took to get there. It's not even satisfying work. It's always painful to lose a job. People experience it as a major breakdown. It feels like an assault on our ego, and our self-esteem takes a hard hit, no matter what we've accomplished or how successful we've been. Even people who admit they left their job long before they were fired suffer. But breakdowns often lead to breakthroughs. Some people find a better job or a better company. Not all companies are alike, by the way. Some go back to school and complete a degree. Some start or buy a business. The people I've worked with who have lost jobs and suffered initially about it usually discover it's the best thing that ever happened to them. If you've worked for the same company for a long time, you may be surprised to learn that there is a whole world outside where you're currently working. If your job is taking a toll on you and your family, get your courage up and leave. We have choices even when we don't think we do. Writing about this, I began to think about two clients I worked with who had the courage not only to leave their jobs, but also family businesses. Boy, is that hard. John was not interested in the laundromat business his father ran, but he was passionate about the environment. Even though he had a wife and 3 children, he got his courage up and told his father he was leaving. He found work related to environmental issues and has had a long, successful career. Terry is a lawyer and did not enjoy the kind of legal practice he was doing in partnership with his brother, so he left the firm and began a journey to discover what was next. He had a lot of ups and downs, but just kept going, learning in every situation. Today, he's a judge, fulfilling a dream he had had since he was young. Both men, to my knowledge, have maintained good relationships with their families. I'm amazed that people still send out resumes to find a job. You know, I think once we went from paper, like jobs being advertised in the papers, to online, people thought that was going to be very different for them. I couldn't figure out how it was really going to be different, but people continued to do the same thing they've always done and just send out resumes for their job. You may not be happy to hear it, but success in job hunting and starting a business both depend primarily on networking. It's the single best way to find or create what you want. Sending out resumes may be easier than networking, but it's like sending something into a black hole. People don't even hear anything back after sending out resumes. It's an exercise in futility and incredibly demoralizing. You don't experience an exchange of energy and information like you do when you're sitting with a human being. Occasionally it works. I have a close friend who landed a great job she was in for years and years through sending in her resume. But it's a small percentage of people that it works with. So spend a little time on it, but put most of your time into connecting with people. Networking takes initiative, and that can be a weak muscle for people who have been employed for a while. But it's just a muscle that can be developed. It's even a good habit to continue to network when you're already employed. Then you can call on people when you need help with knotty problems, or you need to find resources. Don't just keep your nose to the ground. You know, networking requires humility and practicing what we call beginner's mind in Buddhism. If you would take your attention off yourself and stop trying to impress the people you're talking to, and instead are curious and genuinely interested in them, I promise networking will be fun and interesting. If you work anywhere, in a profit setting or nonprofit, manufacturing, wherever, if there are more than 2 people, you can count on the presence of politics and constant soap operas, period. I think as human beings, we're operating at best at work on maybe a 3rd grade level. Okay, maybe 5th. If, like many of my clients, you find playing politics distasteful, focus on deepening your work. Become an expert or highly skilled in an area. My client David worked in a high-level job at a technology company in Silicon Valley. He hated the politics and committed his energy and attention to his work. He became so proficient and so valuable to the company that he was named a fellow, a very prestigious position with lots of freedom. One thing I've observed that I think is odd is that in both social service settings and business, we have different attitudes about coworkers than we do about clients or customers. We're patient and understanding with people who pay us for our services or products. In fact, sometimes we put up with way too much abuse from them. But we're impatient and highly critical of coworkers. It's a double standard because both groups are just people. We need to bring empathy and loving kindness to both. It may be exceedingly challenging, but it's a great spiritual practice. I only have one thing to say really about gossip, and that is if you gossip at work, no one will trust you, period. You have to earn trust. It will not be given to you automatically, especially in the world we live in today. If you tried to make changes where you're working and nothing has happened, it's probably time to leave. After all, it's not your game. It's only your game unless you own the business. I know it's hard to leave, and many people put it off because of loyalty, even though the job is unhealthy for them. But is it really loyalty, or is it lethargy? If it's lethargy, then it may be rooted in one of the 3 Buddhist poisons that are cited as a root cause of suffering, that of clinging or greed. The truth is that we can outgrow our work or our bosses and stay too long. Usually this leads to suffering and mischief. We need to let go and to trust the universe and ourselves that we'll be okay. Here's another bottom line. Unless you're an hourly employee, your work will never be done. We need to pace ourselves and set boundaries to protect our life outside of work. No one else will do that for us. I've observed that when people take on a big job or project, the first thing to go is their health, physical and mental. They stop exercising. They stop paying attention to healthy eating, doing yoga, and meditating. All the self-care practices go out the window. That's one reason why people end up saying the best thing that ever happened to them was losing their job. When they're unemployed, they put taking care of themselves back into their lives. Tanya, who belongs to this Zen center, in her recent Dharma talk, quoted Dogen, an important teacher in our Zen lineage, as saying, quote, "Taking care of yourself is a form of spiritual power," unquote. I just love that. Well, on another note, if you feel that somebody has it in for you and is treating you badly, observe how they treat other people. You'll probably see it's not just you that they treat that way. It's not personal. It may affect you personally, but it's not personal. A great way to learn how to handle difficult people is to observe how other people respond successfully to them. If you complain to me that you talked to your boss about something you were unhappy about and nothing happened, I would ask you to tell me exactly what you said. I'll bet it was a thinly disguised form of adult pouting, sulking, or whining, none of which is a request. It takes real vigor to make a request. We need to really think about what we want and how to ask for it. Pausing, a suggested Buddhist practice, is a great behavior to adopt at work, especially in highly pressured or toxic environments. It's valuable to take time to calm down and get centered before you respond. I have a client who was working in an extremely toxic environment, and I suggested he meditate every day, even if it was only for a few minutes. He agreed, and it became a habit for him to park and sit in his car and meditate for 10 minutes before he entered the building. I also love the advice Christian, who is also a member of our Zen Center, the advice that Christian wrote about pausing in his last newsletter, quote, "Before we send our emails, we can pause and find ways to introduce grace into what we write. We can practice mindful listening and ways to spark joy in what we say," unquote. Isn't that great? I think Buddhism is a pragmatic and sometimes tough practice. I think of it as an in-your-face practice. It's sort of a everything changes, get over it practice. But it's also an encouraging and loving practice. In one of the classes taught here in our center, the teachers suggest we look compassionately at our mistakes as times we're being unskillful instead of castigating ourselves. That viewpoint opens up possibilities for transformation. It reminds me of one line from a beautiful prayer written by Thich Nhat Hanh that my husband Earl and I often say before a meal. The line is, "May we transform our unskilled minds and learn to eat with moderation." Usually when we're deficient in some way, we're defensive and resigned. We tell ourselves, "That's just how I am," as if we're a fixed entity instead of fluid and capable of learning and growing. My client Maria changed jobs and moved into a new industry. She's been struggling. She uses all she learned from her past work experience, but she's in a technology company instead of a medical setting now, and the jargon is completely foreign to her. Additionally, her skills and strengths are different from those of the technical engineers she has to work with. So she decided she owed it to herself to try to fill that gap before she concluded she should leave the company. She has enrolled into an online class in technology on her own time to increase her understanding. In my mind, it's a very Buddhist action. She transformed her state of mind from viewing what she didn't know as an unsolvable problem to just a gap to fill. By the way, I have to admit to you that sometimes Earl and I say, "May we transform our unskilled minds and learn to eat with moderation, except for gelato." A big mistake people often make is not asking for help when they need it. You can feel overwhelmed by a job, or not understand what's expected, or feel unclear about your role. But I think if you give it your best shot and still can't do it, it's either not the right fit or no one person can do it. If you don't ask for help, you risk losing your job. Acknowledging someone takes some thought. Saying good job helps, but what people love is for someone to notice what and how they did something and point that out to them. If you're having difficulty at work with coworkers, using distinctions can be powerful. Instead of saying they, meaning the engineering or IT department, for example, think specifically about who you're having difficulty with. I asked a client this question when he was complaining about a whole department, and he realized that it really was only one or two people. Then he sat down with them and worked on improving their relationship. I love setting goals. I think they're very helpful. We can control our future much more than we often think we can, and putting our attention and intention behind goals is one way to do this. Paradoxically, at the same time, we need to hold our goals loosely. And remember, as Buddha said, life is impermanent. This means, of course, that life is unpredictable. A huge lesson we all learned the last 2 years. So if you're yearning to change jobs, start a business, get a degree or certificate, which I think are great, by the way, or yearning to take a long vacation or a sabbatical, or apply for a new position, retire, or work part-time, do it. Do it now. I've observed that work looks very different after we reach the age of 50. It's the age when people start to ask, how do I want my work life to be, instead of asking what job should I get next? What work would I most love to do? Who do I want to do it with? How do I want to do it? And how do I want my life to be outside of work? Pam has given me permission to use her name, and she's sitting here now. When Pam was 49, she decided she wanted to change from the organization development work she had done for many years inside corporations. She began a journey to discover what was next. She had been interested in medicine when she was younger, and she thought about going to med school. But 2 doctors she interviewed encouraged her to study nursing instead, saying that she would be close to patients and also part of a close community. At age 50, she began school to earn a degree in nursing. And since graduating, she has been doing hospice work for 9 years. She has never been sorry. I had breakfast with Pam on Friday, and she told me this quote from Carolyn Mace, which I loved and think is perfect to begin to put a close to this talk. Quote, any support you give to another person's creative dreams is an act of spiritual ignition, unquote. That's fabulous, Pam. In closing, I often think if there's one thing we owe our Creator, it's to blossom in our lifetime. That's my wish for all of you and those you love and care about. May you find or create work you love, or learn to love the work you already have, and may you blossom in it. Thank you. Deep bows. I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have. Kelly, do you see anybody with a question?
I'm looking here. Oh, Roshi does have a comment or question.
I don't have a question, Robin. I just really enjoyed your talk. It was so practical and down to earth and so much wisdom that you shared with us. Really appreciate your talk. It reminds me of a time when I was at Zen Center Los Angeles, and there was a young fellow there that was really enthusiastic and wanted to ordain as a monk. And he was going to stop. He was making a choice whether to go to college or ordain as a monk at the Zen Center. And he was obviously enthusiastic about Zen practice. And Maizumi Roshi said, well, you're young, go back to school and then come back to the Zen Center. So I think, the education is really important. And it's also really important that we all find our vocation and what is satisfying in work. And that's often very hard for people. So you're talking about something that's really relevant to a lot of people. And really appreciate your talk this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshi. Yeah, and I really agree with you about the education. And one of the great things that's happened since I started over 40 years ago is the certification that people can get in so many different areas. And it's so perfect for working adults. They don't have to go back to college or get a master's or a PhD. And, I think certificates are really wonderful. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the author. It'll come to me, but he's a prominent business person, and he said that investing in your education is one of the best investments you'll make in your entire life.
Yeah.
So I really agree with that. And it can be done in a lot of ways, apprenticeships, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Robin. That was just so wise. You have so much practical advice to give us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else have a question?
See if I can grab this mic just to...
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Whoa, here she comes.
Okay. Yeah, one thing I really appreciated, which I related to, which I think my younger self wouldn't have realized, but the example you gave of the woman who was the teacher and thought she was fed up with some of the bureaucracy and went off to do her own thing, and realized how little of an issue it was. And I work in healthcare, and I've had the ability to take these little sabbaticals where I do something totally different than my job, and I find how much I do appreciate the work that I do.
Yeah.
And when I come back to it, I've come back to almost the exact same job, but have this appreciation for it. And when some of my colleagues talk about how grass the green is on the other side, I'm like, I've been there, and it's good, but also it's pretty nice over here too. So I could relate to that.
Yeah, that's really great. It was great you did that. And I like how you pointed out that your attitude changed, because that's the thing that I think happened with her. She came back with a new appreciation for where she was. And I think the politics are probably just as horrible as they were, when she was there. In fact, I followed some of what's gone on in that school she was teaching in, and it was pretty rough, But I think that her attitude changed, and it became part of, like, she knew that was the 20 to 30% that she needed to put up with, because she actually loved being with the students and loved the teaching. So, and I bet you're great at what you do. What else? Anything else? Kelly, do you have a question, I hope?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I want to say thank you so much for agreeing to do this talk. I really find it wonderful. There's a lot to consider there. I agree with what others said. It's very practical and useful. And I really find it very beautiful. I'll take with me that idea that it's our practice to blossom, and I think keeping that in mind when you make decisions or bigger decisions like this is, I could see that being really helpful. So thank you for that.
That's lovely, Kelly. Thanks. Yes.
Also, just
Can you wait just a second? Yeah.
yeah, I just also wanted to express my gratitude. I'm in non-for-profits and I have a staff of 15 people. And I'm
Oh,
just
bless you.
I'm really reflecting on what you said about how important it is that as a supervisor that really what we should be focusing on is developing our team. And I think you know, particularly in the world that we're living in today, non-for-profit work, there's such competition for, you know, resources and fundraising. And also there's so much work to do. I work in the education space and we support teachers, and teachers are really struggling right now. And so I have been so outward focused, but I am just really grateful that you're making me remember that actually the best thing that I can be doing is helping my staff and supporting them, because that's when they can do the great work. And so if I stay focused on the external, I think that just is actually putting more pressure on them. So I just need to maybe shift it a little bit. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's really great. And you know, I think we forget that when we're in higher positions, everything we do is magnified. You know, if we get really busy and we just walk the halls, you know, and don't even speak to people, you know, they really notice that. And it really bothers them. I remember when I was at a company, I was working on helping to develop a career program for all the employees in a manufacturing facility. And it was a really great company. It was family owned, and they had wonderful benefits and everything for the employees. And they sold the company while I was there, and everything changed. And I remember how I knew how different it was going to be when these guys from Michigan who bought the company came to visit the plant. And I remember them, I'll never forget it, this image of them in their suits walking through the plant, never looking at people, just looking at each other and just talking together, not paying any attention to the employees who were there. You know, it was just shocking to me. And I think that we can get so busy with what we're doing and the huge demands of your job that you can just forget how important your attention, care, and concern is to the employees who work there. So that's really great.
Yeah, I'd like to say I appreciate your comments about being a supervisor and being the person in charge.
About what?
About being the person in charge, about
Yeah.
being a supervisor, because you rarely, really ever hear that. It's almost like there's a cultural thing in this country about the boss is always the bad guy.
Yeah.
There's even a TV show about that, but it's like they have the horrible boss. And I'm a little like you. I changed my job. I went to nursing school when I was 30. And I loved my job. And then I became a supervisor and assistant director of nursing. All of a sudden, I had to decide who works on Christmas Day,
Yes.
Christmas Eve. And we were open 24 hours a day. Patients don't go home for Christmas, go back the next day. First time, you know, I had to learn how to fire somebody who deserved firing, but I was putting a family out of work. I knew that. So that's when it was kind of like, oh, I'm ready for retirement. If I was still working the floors, I probably wouldn't have been, you know, so ready for it. But I just wanted to say I appreciate your comments about it's not easy being a supervisor.
It's the hardest work there is, I think, from my own experience. It's the hardest. Yeah, and Linda, I was just remembering, I did some work on outplacement, you know, when a business is closing. Um, and it was in a plant also. And I was there to be part of to provide outplacement services for the employees. And I was standing next to somebody from headquarters. So this is different from the story I just told, because this man leaned over, he was standing right next to me, and he leaned over and he whispered to me, "This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life," to tell the people, the employees, that their work was disappearing. So he was obviously a man with a big heart. And so I think there are all kinds of bosses. You know, the thing that just totally amazes me is that still companies do very little to help people succeed in that role. You know, there are some classes, but not a lot of companies send people to them.
There's no in-service.
Pardon me?
There's no in-service.
There's no in-service, that's right. And they don't even suggest books to read, you know? So they are doing more of hiring executive coaches, which has been very effective in some places and with some people. But, you know, there's still a lot that's just, people are just left on their own, and it's a very tough job. Anything else? Any other questions? How are we doing with the time? We have a couple of minutes. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. The questions were wonderful, and thank you for being great listeners.
Thank you.